"It's just a cat," Tucker said to Wayland as he re-entered the bedroom. He'd gone out to investigate strange noises that were coming from outside their window. "There's nothing to worry about." "A cat?" Wayland asked. "I want to see it." Wayland was a few years younger than Tucker and had recently been talking about how he wanted a cat of his own. He'd actually been pretty specific on the kind he wanted. It needed to be a kitten, a black kitten, and he would name it Ninja. Why so specific? Well, their father had told them that when he was a kid, he used to have a black cat whose name was Ninja. Ever since he'd heard that, Wayland had decided that he wanted one just like that. "What did it look like?" he asked his older brother. "It looked like a cat," was the response he got. Tucker was always known for being sarcastic. "What color was it? How big was it?" "I don't know," he said. "It's dark outside." He didn't care much, like Wayland did, and any chance of him going back outside to check on these details was simply out of the question. It was amazing to him that he had even mustered up enough courage to go out and check on the noises in the first place. Everyone who knew him knew that he was kind of scared of the dark. "Go to sleep," he commanded his younger sibling. It took some time, but after a while, he obeyed. The next day was a school day. Mornings on school days were no fun. Everyone was tired, cranky, and rushed. Somehow, the family was ready at a somewhat decent time and were all loaded into the van. "Look!" Wayland yelled as they were pulling away from the house. Tucker was annoyed by the loud noise in the early morning, but he looked where his brother was pointing. Underneath their bedroom window, crouched and staring right back at them, was a black kitten. Tucker's day at school was not a good one. Everyone has good days and bad days, but this day seemed particularly bad. Every class he went to, he was unprepared for, and it wasn't like he wasn't trying to be prepared. There were moments when he would forget what class was next, and others where he didn't, but when he got to class, he would find that he had accidentally grabbed the wrong books. Things weren't any better at recess. The boys always had a good game of touch football going on. He prided himself in being the best wide receiver in the class. Passes were never dropped, and he could outrun anyone. In today's game, his friend Jude was the quarterback. For some reason, the whole game, he was not throwing any passes Tucker's way. When Tucker had managed to sneak by the defenders and was wide open in the end zone, Jude finally tossed one. The ball slipped right through his hands and busted him in the nose. It hurt like crazy, and when he put his hands to his face, he found that they were now covered in blood. A teacher noticed he was hurt and started walking him to the office to get looked at. Looking back through his teared-up eyes as he walked to the building, he could see Jude and the other boys shaking their heads in disbelief. It didn't seem as if they were concerned about his well-being, only that he had dropped the sure touchdown. He worried that he may never be trusted with a pass again. When he got to the nurse's office, the bleeding was under control, and the nurse said that she did not believe his nose was broken. "Well, that's lucky," he said. She looked at him with a frown. "You know how I feel about luck and all that," she said. "Let's not be ridiculous now." He did know how she felt. Everyone at school did. Not a single student or teacher at school was in the dark about how Nurse Becky felt about superstitions. "There's no such thing as good or bad luck," she could often be heard saying. "Everything that happens in your life is a direct result of decisions made by yourself or someone else. Superstition does not play a role in your success or failure." Tucker had heard her say this for the last couple of years. He always agreed. He didn't believe in superstition either. But today just seemed to be like there was something off. Now, as Nurse Becky walked to the telephone to call his parents to make sure that they were aware of what happened, he glanced around the room. There was the nurse's desk, kept very neat and organized. A window to the left of him allowed him to see the playground where he should be right now, scoring touchdowns instead of being inside with an injured nose. But the thing that caught his attention the most was a poster on the wall. The content of the poster was no surprise to him, given Nurse Becky's hatred of superstitions. The poster simply read, "Having a bad day? Don't blame me." And the picture on the poster seemed to be staring right back at him. It was a black cat. When they got home after school, Wayland was delighted to see that the kitten was still there, hanging out around their bedroom window. Tucker was not pleased by this, and he wasn't even sure why. Normally he liked animals and would have been teaming up with Wayland as he begged their parents to let them keep the kitten. That kitten might belong to someone, their mother explained to Wayland. But he's been outside all night and all day, he pleaded. There are animals and big birds that might get him. He is not safe by himself outside. She thought this through and reluctantly agreed to let him bring it inside, but only until we find the person he belongs to, she explained. Now the evening passed with Wayland playing with what he now called his new kitten. It's not yours, Tucker tried to explain. As soon as we find the owner, we are taking it back to them. It is true that this was the plan, but what Tucker did not know yet was that the owner would never be found. Now, just as the day had been rough for him, that evening was no better. Dinner was the worst. Breakfast was being served for dinner. He hated eggs, and he was given no choice but to eat every single one that was on his plate. He was asked about his homework, and he went to get his assignment. He had apparently forgotten it at school. How? This didn't make any sense. He knew he had taken time at the end of the day to be sure that he had it. Will this bad luck never end? He asked aloud. Just as he did, he looked across the room toward the purring sound that had caught his attention. Staring right back at him from the comfort of the couch was the kitten. The next day, he was dying to talk to someone about what was going on, but he was reluctant to bring it up to anyone. He thought for sure he would be ridiculed. He could only imagine how he would be called a scaredy cat for being scared of a cat. So, most of the day, he just spent in miserable silence. Recess time came, and wouldn't you know it, it was raining, so no football today. The students were allowed to sit out in the hallway and talk with one another. Jude came over and sat down next to him. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Tucker lied. "Why wouldn't I be?" Jude didn't buy it and just stared back at him. No, you're not. I can tell. You're acting all weird today. Is it because of what happened in the football game yesterday?" Tucker knew he couldn't lie anymore. Jude wasn't fooled. "Well, a little," he responded. "But that's not the whole thing." Tucker then proceeded to tell Jude all about the cat and what had been happening. It felt good to talk about it, but when he was finished, he felt silly. Sure that Jude would laugh at him, he just stared at the lockers along the wall on the opposite side of the hallway. His face felt like it was on fire as he waited for Jude's reaction. "I believe you," he said. Immediately, Tucker looked at his friend in astonishment. "You do?" he asked. "Why?" "Because," he said, and then paused. "A few months ago, the same thing happened to me." Now, Tucker felt a sense of hope the rest of that day and evening. Not only was he not feeling crazy and alone, but Jude had told him that there was something he had done that had ridded the problem from his life. He had even offered to help. This was to take place the next night, Friday night. All Tucker was going to need to do was to get permission to spend the night at Jude's house. That evening, he approached his mom while she was cooking dinner. "Mom," he started, "can I spend the night with Jude tomorrow?" She sighed. "We've talked about this," she said. "You know I don't like the idea of sleepovers." He thought she might say that. I mean, It was true. This subject had been discussed many times before. Besides, what else should he have expected with his stroke of bad luck and all? But then an amazing thing happened. She said, "But Jude is a good friend of yours, and I really do like his family. Perhaps you can go this once." He couldn't believe it. Maybe his luck was changing after all. School dragged by the next day. Both boys were excited and a bit nervous about that night. Jude's explanation about what was going to happen went something like this. "We have to go down to the creek and get some rocks. There's an old well out by the abandoned farmhouse near mine. At exactly midnight, you have to throw those rocks into the well." "I don't understand," Tucker said. "This all sounds so made up and silly to me. Are you sure you aren't pulling my leg?" "No," Jude shot back. "I'm telling you it works. A few months ago, a black kitten was haunting me just like you, and I had to do this." "Okay, but how did you know to do this? That's kind of a weird thing to figure out." "I didn't just figure it out," he admitted. "My grandma told me about it. She said this is something that has been happening around here for generations." "But why that well? And why rocks from that creek? Can't we just use any rocks?" "No," he said. "It has to be this way, and I don't know why. I think there's a lot more to it that my grandma knew, but she can't tell us now because she died last month." Tucker didn't question him any further. He remembered when Jude's grandma had passed away, and it had been very hard for him, so he just let it go. Perhaps they could discover more about this mystery sometime in the future, and maybe there really was nothing to this whole thing anyway. It didn't really matter because tonight they were going to sneak out and do it. If it worked, great, and if not, what harm could it do? After dinner, they went to Jude's room and started in on video games. This was only half-hearted, though. Normally, they loved them, but what was on their minds was the mission that lay ahead of them. But for now, they needed to put on a front and not let Jude's parents suspect anything. It worked. After some time, everyone in the house was asleep except for Jude and Tucker. They sneaked out the back door and into the night. "It's so quiet out," Tucker remarked in a low voice. "That's good," said Jude. "We will be able to hear the creek easier this way." Hear it they did. In just a matter of minutes, they were there. "What kinds of rocks am I supposed to be getting?" "Any of them that are completely under the water. They have to be completely submerged or it won't work," explained Jude. Tucker didn't question him, and he pulled 7 smaller rocks out of the cool, running water. He put them into his pocket. He did this because Jude had explained that there needed to be 7 rocks from this creek. "Okay," said Jude. "Let's go." He followed him deeper into the woods. In a spooky situation like this, you'd expect a full moon, but it wasn't. The boys found themselves wishing that it was, though, so that they would have more light to see where they were going. After what seemed like hours, they arrived at their destination. Jude led the way to the well. It was old for sure. There were weeds growing around it. They approached solemnly, as if they were scared about what they might be met with. "Okay," said Tucker. "Do I just throw them in? It's midnight in about a minute." "No," Jude replied, not sure why he was still whispering. "We have to stand right at the edge, and you drop one at a time. You don't drop the next until you hear the splash of the last." So they went right to the edge. Tucker pulled a stone from his pocket and dropped it in. Right before he did, he had a thought. What if he wasn't able to hear the splash? But after dropping the stone, he didn't worry about that anymore because the splash was definitely there. He dropped another and another. Before too long, 6 stones had been dropped. 6 splashes had splashed. He was down to the last one. He took a deep breath with stone in hand. "Please work," he said. He just wanted this whole thing to be over. He put his hand over the opening of the well. Right before he released it, he squeezed his hand tight out of fear. Jude, who had been whispering quietly up to this point, shouted in fear. Startled, Tucker turned toward him to see what was going on. A black cat had jumped out of a nearby tree and was now clawing him through his shirt. He began to fall backwards and instinctively reached out and grabbed Tucker's arm to steady himself. It didn't work. Both boys fell. Both boys fell into the well. Tucker didn't have much time to think as he first went in. The only thought he had was, "This is the end. We're going to die." And just as he planned, there were 7 splashes in the well that night. The first 6 were the stones. The 7th was the boys. Tucker had closed his eyes on impact. When he opened them, he was thrilled to be alive. But he was shocked. He wasn't wet. He was even more shocked that he wasn't in a well. He was in his bed. The whole thing must have been a dream. He had never had a dream so real before. How much of it had been a dream, though? He left the room and went to the kitchen. Wayland was at the table eating cereal. "Where's the cat?" he asked his younger brother. Wayland looked at him like he was crazy. "What cat?" He had never felt such relief in his life. The whole thing, none of it, had been real. He sat down at the table and smiled. He felt almost like crying tears of joy right then and there. At this time, his mom walked in from the back door. "Look what I found, boys," she said excitedly. And in her arms, she held a black kitten. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, if you could click the like button, that would be appreciated. Also, if you have not subscribed, you can do that and click the notification bell so that you can be notified when future stories are uploaded. You could also email the email address that is on the screen. And if you do that, what you can do, this is custom storyteller. So if you were to email a topic and your topic is selected, we will write a story around your topic and upload it as one of our future videos. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the story.